there are not many SaaS apps out there that have lasted 25 years and that have grown to the scale that SharePoint has over 25 years, let alone exist. The flip side of that is, in a lot of cases, like some of our customers are still on-prem. To your point, like the version of SharePoint that they have deployed is from 3, 4, 6, 7, like 2004 through 7, right? Even before the cloud. And so their view of the world when they see SharePoint is that. Even customers that are on SharePoint Online and some of and our latest bit who get our monthly releases, even with them, like we have to constantly fight the battle of getting them to discover some of the newest features that we push out. Even things like Flex Sections or Editorial cards, all of the stuff that we launched with great fanfare, it's seeing great take-up, but not all customers know about this. So when they think about SharePoint, they still tend to think about this as the very early 2000s or maybe even the 2010s SharePoint versus what SharePoint is today. A common reaction sometimes when I do this with customers or when I do customer conversations and kind of like show them and walk them through the demo, they'll be like, wait, you can build that with SharePoint?
Well, welcome everyone to a new episode of Fresh Perspectives. I'm Horst, Senior Product Manager for Fresh Intranet, and with me I have
David Bowman, Product Director for Fresh. Almost completely missed my cue there. We have a special guest today. Say hello.
Hi everyone. My name is Kripal Kavi. I am a Group Product Manager at Microsoft, and I work on the SharePoint team, and I lead product for a whole bunch of areas within SharePoint, specifically SharePoint experiences. So ranging from SharePoint sites, pages, the Viva Amplify space, connections, and more recently, SPFX as well, which is our extensibility platform for SharePoint. And we also have this internal M365 service called Notify, which I own as well. So it's a pretty broad portfolio of things. Nice to be here.
Well, yeah, we're super excited for this conversation today because you're in charge of a lot of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, worrying about. So it's great you're able to take some time to spend with us today.
Yeah, no, great to be here.
Awesome. All right. So hey, look, thanks for the introduction to your role. What do you think is probably the most energizing thing that you're working on in what is a very broad scope of your role? What's the best bit?
Yeah, no, it's glad. I can also see that Yarbo's got his coffee with him, so I don't feel a little alone and left by myself with a cup of coffee that I'm drinking here, so I don't feel awkward. So thank you, Yarbus, for making me feel, welcome. There you go. So I would say, as I think about there is the things that I'm working on, and there's my role itself and what's exciting about it. Maybe I'll start with just like what's my role and why I find it extremely exciting and energizing. When I explain my portfolio, I think like you would have noticed that I have both a blend of at scale assets, something that's more in the I would say like in the maturing phase, so somewhere in between, and stuff that's also 0 to 1. So to be able to span from like sites, hundreds of millions of users, Viva connections pretty at scale as well. But then on the other hand, Viva Amplify is still something that we're looking to get off the ground very much in the 0 to 1 or the 1 to n phase, I should say. So just being able to span that, exercise different sides of my brain, where on one side, like it's more about managing customer requests and asks and so on and so forth. And on the other side, it's a little bit more about, okay, so what do we think customers want to go build, want out of this product, right? It's very much something that doesn't exist today. So I think that's pretty exciting. The second thing that I'll say is also looking at the portfolio, my work kind of ranges from, hey, like core UX, how are people building beautiful web pages, to all the way to developer facing, which is again, like it's UX extensibility, but it is still more developer facing, right? So the audience is a little bit different. On one hand, we're working with creators and makers. And on the other side, it's more like, it's people who can code, actual engineers. So being able to work and learn on a day-to-day basis how to engage effectively and build for these very different kind of customers is super engaging. So I learn something new every day. I'm relatively new to the team. Jeff Deeper, our father of SharePoint, has been here for like 25 years, close to 25 years of SharePoint. I've been here all of one. So I think I learn something new every single day, not just from the people above me, but also from our partners, our customers, and the people on my team as well. So yeah, that's what's so energizing and keeps me excited.
And that it's a really broad remit that you're responsible for there. And I think one thing that I'm always reminded about when I'm talking to people from Microsoft, particularly from the kind of product engineering area, is the scale of the challenge, right? When you see the kind of statistics that Jeff and others talk about, the usage of SharePoint, the millions of customers that are using this thing, just it's beyond thinking about individual features. Just the scale of the engineering challenge there is huge. It's so broad. How does that keep you awake at night, worrying about those kind of things, or are you able to compartmentalize some of those challenges?
Yeah, no, I think the scale of the SharePoint, I think, is one of the most underappreciated things about SharePoint. And again, Jeff shared this stat at the M365 conference earlier this year. I think the stat, if I remember correctly, was something like 2 billion files uploaded per week and 2 million sites created per day on SharePoint. Now, like those numbers are just like mind-boggling, and that's on a per day and a per week basis, right? So I think thankfully we have an excellent, we call them like the core team that works in the core infrastructure of SharePoint, where this is all they do. Like they live, breathe, making sure that the infrastructure is up and running at a high degree of reliability. So I think thankfully, like we can kind of like rely on them as we focus more on the experiences side of SharePoint. But at the same time, like I think we don't get a free pass on when we add new features, especially to the scale side of the business, right? Like so, if we do something wrong, the community is not shy about letting us know when we screwed up. So Yarbrough and the other MVPs keep us very honest and they're very vocal. So I think from that standpoint, I think we pay a lot of attention to making sure that what we're building is applicable and in a way addresses most of our customer needs, which is not easy to do more often than not.
And in amongst all of those things, is it possible to pick a favorite? Right? Is there like when you're looking down the agenda for the day, for the week, the month, you're like, oh yes, finally, I get to talk about this one thing, my kind of favorite. My favorite feature.
You guys are gonna get me into trouble. I'll say my one favorite feature or my two favorite. It's like picking a favorite child, right? Like, and then like, as long as they don't hear it, it's okay. But then once they hear it, you'll be like, oh wait, why didn't you pick me? But what about this? And what about this? Anyway, so at the risk of breaking into jail here with my team, I think maybe there's one that I use fairly often and one that I think I'm delighted by every single time I use it. And that is, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's the editorial cards feature. We launched this a little earlier this year. And like, I'm a design klutz. Like, I mean, I couldn't design something to look good to save my life. So thank God I have a really good set of design partners to work with, right? I think we do a pretty good job defining product, but then actually designing it and how it looks and feels. I think my design partners probably wouldn't give me much credit for it. But I think like what I really appreciate about editorial cards is like even like a design klutz like me can make a pretty good looking SharePoint page with it. And it's fairly easy. It's also incredibly powerful where if you want to play around with things like the layout options, whether you want an image, whether you want a color block, whether you want to like set up the call to actions in like different ways, I feel like we did a really good job where we made something that was super powerful, which SharePoint is traditionally known for. But this time we also made it in a way that's super easy to approach for somebody who's new to SharePoint. So it doesn't require you taking a bunch of online classes to be able to use the editorial cards feature, but you can just like jump in there. It's very intuitive. And even if you did nothing, it makes your SharePoint page look pretty good. So I would say like I use that all the time on my news posts and all the page, like I publish a news post every week that my team consumes. And that is one of my most heavily used features. And like, I really do like it.
Yeah, as a team that spends a lot of time building, web parts, demoing web parts, looking at them, you really get a sense of that component because it's quite a simple concept, but what you recognize as someone that is also building these features is there is a huge amount of complexity and engineering and thought and creativity that's gone into a component like that to make it so simple and so easy to use. There's, it becomes a very complicated thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the easy thing for us to do is to foist that complexity onto all of you, right? We're like, we'll just add all the bells and whistles to it, and we'll give you all the dials, and we'll let you and our customers kind of deal with it. And the hard part is sifting through all of that complexity to come out on the other side with something that actually works really well and scales to a pretty broad set of customers and use cases, but at the same time can be used by someone who's like brand new to SharePoint. And that's the hard part, like striking that balance. And we often get it wrong, but I feel like the reason I like this so much is because one, it makes our job easier and when I'm publishing my news post every week. But like I feel like we struck that balance well here. And I'd love for us to capture that whatever magic in that bottle that we found and replicate that across every single feature we build.
Kripal, like as you said, right? So SharePoint has been evolving so fast with so many features. So I think you have right now a very hard job, like in picking a favorite one. I would have that as well. So like think of SharePoint as it is now. So where does SharePoint fit alongside other Microsoft 365 services like Teams, Viva, and Copilot?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think, I mean, when we think about M365, it's a suite, right? And I think different elements of the suite play to their own strengths. You said Viva Viva is a bit like it's an umbrella term. We've got Viva Connection, we've got Viva Amplify, we've got Viva Engage. So even within Viva, we have a whole host of other suites, application suites. It's a suite by itself. So I would say that when I think about SharePoint, first and foremost, I think it started like it all starts with the basics, right? It's your content store, and your content can be files, your content can be pages, your content can be news posts. So anything that's relevant from an enterprise standpoint, your content, I think the home for it is SharePoint. That's SharePoint's job number one. That's why we got hired for in the first place, right? And then now there are the use cases to which that content can be applied. And then the typical use cases are like comms, collab, workflow, and knowledge. When I say workflow, I mean, I'm also throwing automation in there. And so when I think about SharePoint and its role, I think it is about enabling and serving up those, whatever content is stored in it in the most effective way for those use cases. So I'll take an example of Teams. Teams is obviously the real-time collab tool of choice within M365. But at the same time, when you're collaborating with someone, you are collaborating on files. And sometimes once you've collaborated on, or you've had a meeting and you want to publish that meeting to a publicly discoverable location, you want that content sitting somewhere, right? And I think so when you think about SharePoint, we want to make it super easy for people to be able to store, access, and collaborate on their files on SharePoint. And at the same time, once they're done with meetings, make it super easy to turn that, I'll pick a recent example of a feature that we're working on, turn that meeting recording into a news post without having a whole bunch of work that needs to get done behind the scenes so that people who weren't there at that meeting can get caught up without having to watch a 1 hour long transcript. So it's things like that I think, like when I think about SharePoint's role, I think SharePoint, like if you had to ask me how would I describe SharePoint and how it fits within M365, I think about it as the underlying fabric for M365, where all of these solutions are built on top of, like whether it's Viva, a lot of the Viva pieces, Teams, Loop, and like even Copilot, right? Like the number one cited source for Copilot is SharePoint. So the ability for us to be able to do that, and I think like that's our job number one, is to be the content store for highly relevant information across your enterprise.
SharePoint is this strong foundation, right? Well, okay, it's strong foundation. It's kind of, I think, one of SharePoint's superpower. Because even like in the intranet context, like for us building on top of SharePoint and providing there an intranet. So that's a nice aspect of SharePoint.
Yeah, and I think that kind of making content flexible. Maybe I'm not quite describing that right as a sort of main superpower of SharePoint feels really important, right? Because there are so many ways of being able to access and look at the content that's in SharePoint that making sure that it is as flexible as possible is
exactly,
really
exactly, right? Like I tend to think of SharePoint as the Swiss Army knife, which is both it's both an app and a platform very much. And on one end, we use it for core comms use cases, internet publishing. And on the other hand, we use it for more complex workflow and business process automations, right? Like whether it's even things like vacation policy, expense filings, or even something that's a little bit more complicated than that, like legal contract management. So I think from that angle, like it has to be able to serve both jobs. And again, like similarly, we have out of the box, like we have a strong set of out of the box features, but at the same time, I think we support partners like you who build on the out of the box offer that we have to make it that much more tailored for a certain set of customers for whose set of use cases the out of the box doesn't work well enough. So we have to be able to serve you as well in order to be able to build on top of SharePoint to effectively serve our collective customers.
Everyone is a customer.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Is there one thing, particularly that you think that SharePoint is doing really well that people don't necessarily notice?
So there are a couple of things I will say. And I think one I can think of is just how we have to manage at the kind of scale that we do. I mean, I kind of mentioned the stats a little earlier, right? And I think this is one of those things where you don't get credit if you get it right, but you get dinged really badly if you get it wrong. Right. So nobody nobody gives us credit for, oh, great. Like you guys were up and running. Right. But oh my God, like the ICMs we get or like the incidents that we get if we have some outage somewhere, even if it's for a small, even if it's an, I would say, far less used side of SharePoint. Right. So I would say that is something that I think goes completely underappreciated, which is the actual work that it takes to keep a service of this scale operating at the level of reliability that we do. The second thing I'll also say is like just the surface area of SharePoint. I mean, I know we've gone from the on-prem world to SharePoint Online now and so on and so forth. And then now we're in modern SharePoint, which is like the new look and feel for SharePoint itself. But I think when you think about like the tendrils in terms of like how we attach to Power Automate or Azure Workflow in the old world, and of course like the core Intranet use cases, and then standing up SPFX, like even in my world alone, just the breadth of what SharePoint needs to do is, I think, underappreciated. And then when you tack on everything else that has like that's done on SharePoint, I think it's just it's not easy to build something that's this flexible and this broad in terms of its applicability.
Yeah, I think we've talked previously about SharePoint search and just kind of thinking through the amount of support that the team there have to provide across, not just people that are using it out of the box, but people that have used the configuration options, additional customizations, the PnP templates. That there is so much surface area you've got to support in each feature that as someone that has some sympathy for a lot of those challenges, but not necessarily at that scale. When you see people complaining about a sort of what is a minor thing that's happening in SharePoint, yes, it's very annoying, but look, the scale that this team are operating at is huge. It's inevitable that things are going to go wrong.
Yeah, no, for sure, I agree. I will say though, David, that I guess scale is not an excuse of mediocrity. So for us, right, like I think, the reality is we have a finite set of resources that we have to choose to deploy where, right? And at the same time, sometimes, unfortunately, as much as we would like to fix every single broken window across the house, we have to pick and choose the ones that really matter the most, right? Where the draft is the worst, I should say. So, I think like this is where we really lean on partners like you, our MVP community, our customers to tell us, hey, like, okay, so what are the things that really do need fixing so we can help prioritize our what are the set of resources that we have? So
yeah. Well, and full credit for being as responsive as you guys are, really.
Yeah, no, we try.
If you look like more here towards the future, or where SharePoint is right now, it feels like SharePoint has been getting a lot of more attention from Microsoft. We see a lot of new features coming, especially around the pages part, and that's really nice to see. Especially like now with AI, we see also like more things coming there, the integrations with Copilot. So the question for you is like, is SharePoint going through a revolution or an evolution at this point?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I want to say both, but I think if I had to pick one between the two, I would say like revolution for sure. 100%. In some ways, I think SharePoint is just going to turn 25, and the last 25 years have been great, but the next 25 years are going to be nothing like the last 25 in terms of like the landscape, like the competitive landscape, how people work, user interaction models. So I think like whether we like it or not, AI is just changing how we work on a day-to-day basis, and it's not changing changing how we work in terms of decades or even years. It's like weeks and months. Like just the other day, I was having my conversation with my brother-in-law where he was remarking he had to go to this other CRM tool and he had to create the report the old school way, and he was like he was just like, oh man, like I'm so used to just calling up an AI assistant and asking it for the right answer. And I could see that he was visibly annoyed that he had to go and create this report like manually and pull the data and munge it, right? And this is, again, like this is just a matter of like months in terms of like how much of a shift that has been in how users use tech today. So people's habits are changing. So I think in some ways it's existential for SharePoint to change as well, like in some ways, right? Otherwise we just get left behind. And I think like we're like, if you take a look at us and our investments, you'll see that we are well on that journey. Like AI forward authoring, things like the knowledge agent, which we just spoke about in September, that helps site managers and site owners manage their sites more effectively, keep content up to date on SharePoint, which is one of the biggest challenges. So we're looking at leaning in on AI to make all of those tasks a lot easier. But at the same time, it's also like the reason I struggled a little bit with evolution versus revolution is sometimes like people hear the word revolution and it's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, like it's burn the boats, right? Like there's only forward, there is nothing behind. And I think it's not so much that, where we have to also invest in the core, which is why you've seen us do things like the improvements to the pages that we have made, just generally like page authoring and things like that, where we have to continue to invest in the core. We'll continue to invest in SPFX. I don't know whether you caught this or not, but we just, for the first time ever in SPFX's history, like we published our roadmap, like a public roadmap going out, I think like the next 6 to 8 months. And now we're going to hold ourselves, or we'll enable you to hold us accountable to making sure that we are doing right by the SPFX community. So I think like investing in the core gives us the license to go chase the future. And I don't think we get to do that without bringing our customers, partners, and everybody else who's taken a big bet on SharePoint over the past 25 years along. So anyway, but if I step back and think about just the degree of change and the scale of change that's happening across like the different elements and dimensions, it definitely feels more revolutionary than evolutionary. But at the same time, we are going to bring our customers and partners along that journey, right? So yeah.
You need to be kind of operating on that both gears, as you said, right? You need like to focus on also like on the existing capabilities and making sure that they are kind of following also like the market, and then like also in terms of the AI, of course, kind of keep adding kind of the functionalities, because that's also something that people need nowadays. And I think that this knowledge agent is very spot on, because it brings AI in the context of people's work. So it's right there where you need it. So really, really nice feature that you added recently.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, we just scratched the surface. September was the first release of this. There'll be more to share. Come ESPC, come M365 conference the next year. I don't want to overpromise, but we're working on a lot more things that I think will be pretty exciting for the community.
Nice. And you know, I guess we certainly get a sense that AI Copilot is certainly changing the way that you and team are thinking about SharePoint and the future of SharePoint. And you know, we talk a lot in our team and with customers as well about this idea that the user interface, the user experience, right? Of, you open a web browser and there is a user interface that's waiting for you, and you've got navigation, search, and components. Do you think that that still has a place in a digital employee experience, or are we going to see a sort of switch to prompt-based, text-based interfaces replacing that?
Yeah, well, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could tell you exactly how things would play out, because people a lot smarter than me are still trying to figure this out. But I have my point of view, my itty bitty data point of one, and I think 100% there has to be a place for both. I think there are some things that are great through a conversational natural language interface, and there are some things that UX is great at. So 100%. I think, like when you think about people looking for certain things or looking for a specific answer about something, I think natural language is awesome. And it gives you exactly what you're looking for, assuming the LLM's been tuned well and is grounded on the right set of sources. You can follow, you can do follow-on inquiry, you can go back and forth on it. So I think conversational interfaces are great for that. But if you think about the consumption of content, I think humans, we still are an inherently visual species, right? Like we like pictures more than words. That's just what we gravitate to. And I think again, not to get overly geeky, but I mean, if you think about it, the optic nerve is essentially the extension of it's an extension of our brain. So I think visuals really matter, UX really matters. And there are some cases that conversational interface will work really well. And there are some cases where I think UX is absolutely important. So that's slider where we go, and you'll see us do both too. And I'll give you a great example of that, right? So one, we have the AI forward page authoring experience, what we call is Copilot for pages. But at the same time, we've also invested in the FAQ web part, which is not just question and answers, or it's not purely reliant on the conversational interface, but also requires the Q&A to actually show up in a much more easily consumable format on the page itself, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about the investments that we make, we will do things that are conversational forward, but at the same time, I think also invest heavily in making sure that the UX is great. And you'll see more from this in the coming months.
Yeah.
On investments in the UX side as well.
I think that frequently asked questions is a great example of, putting AI to work, right? That it's not necessarily, the end user doesn't need to ask this thing questions or come up with prompts. The AI is doing the work to stop an administrator having to lay out, what is, can be quite a boring task.
I think, again, like just to use another example outside of SharePoint land, right? Like just us friends talking here for a second. I don't know whether you got OpenAI's Dev Days announcement from like a day or two ago. And they launched these things called like apps within ChatGPT, which is a little different from a GPT itself, and they gave the example like of a couple of apps. And I think there was one use case where I looked at that and it's like, oh yeah, I would totally use that. Where I think it was Coursera, one of the other MOOCs, where you could consume the we could consume the course online. You could pause it. You can ask a question right there in chat, and then you can consume, and then you can continue. But there were some others where I was like, I'm not quite sure I would actually use it like that. Like they used, I think, some another web authoring platform where they were like, hey, like create a web page to go do this, right, for my company. And I'm like, people actually don't work like that in the real world. Like if you're creating a web page to stand up to represent your company or your team or your organization, you're not just going to complete the entire workflow in a chat interface. You may start there, get a starting point to work with, but then ultimately you're going to be dropped into UX where you can fine tune it to exactly what you want. Make sure that it's pixel perfect before it goes out the door. So I think, yeah. So again, like in a very real way, I think there is a lot of room for both chat and natural language and traditional UX based interface. But of course, like it's a slider and it's going to move back and forth.
Coming to intranets as a sort of specific area in SharePoint, obviously our view is that there's a huge amount of power in the SharePoint intranet specific features. Do you have any views on what organizations should be thinking about in order to make their intranets in SharePoint more successful, achieve greater outcomes? Any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear your perspectives as well, right? Like, because I think it'll help us kind of inform how we think about the product. But I'll share my quick 2 cents. I think one, like in terms of what makes an internet successful, I think is the recency of content. Like one of the big challenges that intranets face is, and which is why we're also investing in features to help our customers and partners address that, is content of the internet can get stale and out of date pretty quickly. So how do you keep content up to date? How do you ensure that the relevant content is surfaced to the user at the right point in time, whether it's through search or whether it's even through like navigational paradigm? Getting that right, I think, is kind of critical. So it takes an investment right now from customers who are looking to roll out an internet in order to be able to get that right. But we're looking to make that a lot easier. I think the second thing to think about is internet kind of like serves multiple jobs to be done. And the best way to think about, I think, like when I see really successful intranets at customers, they are not single purposed. They are not. And what I mean by that is, it's not an internet that is only used to get news and communications out, or it's not an internet that is only used in order to light up the key resources that an employee needs to get certain things done. So it's a combination of that. And that's what keeps users coming back to using the internet and makes that an ongoing habit, right? Like, because and it also makes the intranet a lot more valuable to a wide variety of users as opposed to just one. So this is an example again, and that's kind of the thinking that we had in mind when we initially stood up Connections, right? We didn't have a story on mobile, so we needed a story on mobile, and Connections was our answer. But when we built Connections, we didn't make it only about comms. We didn't make it only about news. We didn't make it only about task and resource access, like task completion and resource access. We made it about all of it because we feel like, and that's the way we think, like we can make Connections and in general, like internet's valuable to users across a broad set of customers and a broad set of users within a given customer who may choose to use the internet in slightly different ways.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that sometimes the frustration we have in conversations with customers about product and platform selection is that it can feel like the easiest choice to opt for something that is a sort of single purpose tool, right? SaaS product that is focusing exclusively on news and comms. And, it's going to solve one problem, but it's going to create a bunch of others in its wake, which aren't necessarily the domain of the person that is launching the kind of comms-based intranet to resolve, likely to result in some level of user friction. But it feels like the easy option because SharePoint can look complicated, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's our fault, right? Like, it's like we need to go one on our end, do what we can do to make SharePoint simpler to use. And at the same time, rely on partners like you, right? Like, who take all of the, I would say, like the tools we give you, and then you build on top of those tools to build an abstracted layer that's easier for consumers to consume. And I would say that, especially if you think about an AI era, you do not want your organizational knowledge fragmented, because that's going to make it so much more harder for you to pull all of this content together into a single place in order to be able to reason over to say, hey, in my community, they said this, but my authoritative source on SharePoint says this. Which one's actually right? This one was like the community post was made 2 years ago, but then this one, like this news post was made like, I don't know, 6 months ago. Yeah. Like, how do I even being able to reason over that? You need to have your content in one place, right? So I think point solutions, sure. I think like, I don't want to speak ill of our competitors, but I think they're good, but up to a point, right? But I think like if you truly want to prepare yourselves for the AI era, you want your internet real estate, plus your content, plus all your community stuff sitting in like one single place that your models can reason over.
That's the beautiful part of SharePoint here, right? So SharePoint is the foundation, so it's kind of providing all of this data also like here to Copilot, and it enables like extensibility also like with Power Platform. So I think, right, and I have been working like in this field of SharePoint, Microsoft for over the 15 years. So it's really great like to see like the benefits that the clients can take when they are within like the platform, right? Also, like the thing of AI, I think it's really it's essential in the benefits that people can get here.
So I'm going to pull myself up on my use of the word complicated there, because I think often it can feel like a criticism, right? But I think that under that complexity is you're able to create something that is very broad, very specific at times for users, can be very personalized, can be very targeted. People are trying to achieve complicated outcomes, and it does need a product that can meet that level of complexity. So, it's not necessarily a criticism of SharePoint. It's just saying, if you're trying to achieve a complicated outcome, the tools are naturally going to be a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. And we'll do our best. Like, we sweat about this every day. It's how do we make it simpler and easier to use? How do we make it simpler and easier to use? Because I think like if you think about like generally like how SharePoint has to evolve when you think of in a Copilot or an AI first world, I think simplicity is key, because like right now a lot of our AI like if you take a look at a lot of the AI forward apps, right, like they are maximalist or minimalist depending on how you look at it in their approach, right, which is like they're trying to synthesize everything down to a single prompt box. And I think there is some room for simplicity there, but at the same time, when you want to get certain things done, you need to get out of that prompt box, like I said, into like the actual UX. And that's where I think SharePoint can really play to its strengths.
Yep.
If we like talk about kind of people's perception on SharePoint, and because we go to many events, especially like with the focus on internal communication, and we'll go there and talk to, we are offering a SharePoint intranet, an intranet in SharePoint, and we talk to people, right? So what do you think about SharePoint? We are going to get mixed feedback, which can be sometimes it is complicated. It's hard to find information. And so I think, right, so that perception might come like from previous versions of SharePoint. Maybe people like the version that they used last time was maybe 2013, 2010, 2007.
Yeah.
And things have really like changed like to the better. So do you get like similar type of feedback? And do you think that this perception is changing?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. I think that's one of the challenges that we face, because like if you ask me one of like again like what is one thing about SharePoint that people frequently get wrong, and it's no fault of theirs. It's because SharePoint is such a, I would say, it has been such a durable product in the enterprise that, and it's there are not many SaaS apps out there that have lasted 25 years and that have grown to the like at the scale that SharePoint has over 25 years, let alone exist. So, but the flip side of that is in a lot of cases, like some of our customers are still on-prem. To your point, like the SharePoint, the version of SharePoint that they have deployed is from 3, 4, 6, 7, like 2004 through 7, right? Even before the cloud. And so their view of the world when they see SharePoint is that. Like they don't see even customers that are on SharePoint Online and some of and our latest bits who get our monthly releases, even with them, like we have to constantly fight the battle of getting them to discover some of the newest features that we push out. Even things like flex sections, right? Like or editorial cards, all of the stuff that we thought that we launched with great fanfare. It's seeing great take-up, but not all customers know about this. And so when they think about SharePoint, they still tend to think about this as the very early 2000s or maybe even the 2010s SharePoint versus a kind of SharePoint like versus what SharePoint is today. Like a common reaction sometimes when I do this with customers or when I do customer conversations and kind of like show them and walk them through the demo, they'll be like, wait, you can build that with SharePoint? And yes. And yeah. And this has been out in market for over a year now. And then, you can quickly see the CIO or the conf person like open the laptop, fire off an email, like right there in the customer meeting, right? Like where we're kind of like, it's like, okay, great. Like we need to know more about this. Anyway, so I would say like that's the biggest, I would say, misconception of SharePoint that we have to constantly fight. And again, like I said, it's nobody's fault that there's this misconception that exists. It's just because SharePoint's that durable for product that's lasted for that long. And changing perception takes time and effort.
Yeah, and it has evolved like a lot throughout kind of this 25 years. We see this evolution, we're part of that. And I'm like really excited what's yet to come.
What are your views on third-party solutions like Fresh? I mean, we've talked about it a little bit already in the discussion today. We hear people saying to us, "Well, look, I've got SharePoint. It's an intranet. It's an intranet out of the box." We don't always agree with that. It's a toolkit that you need to assemble in some ways. What views from you on the role of third-party SharePoint intranet solutions like Fresh?
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's a little bit like I said before. A SharePoint is both an app and a platform, and for some users and for some customers, out of the box SharePoint makes sense, like for the use cases that they want to achieve. But for a lot of customers, they need the extra layer of abstraction on top to really unlock value for their use cases, right? And from our point of view, like we love both, I think, and I think both are essential. And this is where like partners like you all come in, like Fresh come in, right? Like where you take our stock out of the box offering and you build on it and fine tune it for customer specific like use cases, and you give the customers truly what they need so they can maximize the ROI from their SharePoint investments. You all know the customer so well and so intimately across all of the different use cases. At our scale, it's great to have you on our partners like you on our side, kind of evangelizing what SharePoint can actually go out and do, because there is no way we can just scale to talk to each and every customer and see what their use case is and say, this is how you need to go tune SharePoint in order to achieve your use case, right? We'll never be able to do that. We'll never scale. So I think the work that you all do is kind of critical in terms of being able to take the value of SharePoint and share it with customers. And I think the converse is also true, which is our partners and our MVP community are some of push us the hardest in terms of in terms of improving our platform, because you are at the front lines with customers, right? Like when something doesn't work like it should, or something needs to work a certain way, like you're there on the customer call, like sitting at the customer side, like getting a earful from whether it's the comms person or exactly right. So, and you feed that feedback back to us. So I think like the work you all do helps us and eventually build a better platform as well, right? Like something on both sides, taking the best of what SharePoint has to offer and showcasing it to our customers. And the flip side, which is taking what customers really need and synthesizing that to us in a way that is useful so that we can actually move the platform forward. I think partners like Fresh are like super critical for us.
Sorry, bringing this like a bit to an end. We don't want to take much of your time, Kripal. We know you're a very busy guy. We have a lot of goodness to build the SharePoint. We don't want to disturb you, but like without kind of getting into trouble. So can you kind of tell us a bit like what is the direction where SharePoint is going? So what can we expect without getting into trouble here?
Yes, I'll do my best not to get into trouble, and then you guys can keep me honest. So I think one, you'll see us lean in more on and do more on the AI front. And when you think about an AI forward world, I think simplicity is key. Like I said before, there's an approach where you can say, where, hey, you take the maximalist approach where you dumb everything down to a prompt box. I don't think we're going to get there. I think the slider exists somewhere in between UX and the prompt box and the conversational interface. But it's clear that SharePoint needs to be even simpler than it is today. So we've been on a journey of simplifying SharePoint. We'll have to continue on that journey. If anything, that journey is going to accelerate. So you'll see us like within the next 3, 6, 9 months start to announce things that make SharePoint even simpler to use from an information architecture standpoint. So I think that's point number 1. 2, again, like thinking on this, on this dimension, the era of AI, right? It's SharePoint is more than just your, I would say, your content source. In some ways, it is the authoritative source for your enterprise. So how do we really lean into that? And so the investments that we are making will hinge around things like making sure that content on SharePoint is much more easily machine, or I'll say like LLM readable, not just files, but also things like pages, news post, the navigational like around the site, the navigational elements around the site. So those are also incredibly like how you lay information around on your intranet is also a critical piece of information that can get fed back and used by LLMs and so on and so forth, right? If nothing else, is to fine tune what the site should look like. But all said and done, I think we're thinking of like the investments that you'll make, that you'll see us make, are about helping surface SharePoint content in a much more LLM friendly, readable way. And conversely, also, if you think about SharePoint as the authoritative source for your enterprise, how do you keep that authoritative source fresh, relevant, and up to date? Like no pun intended.
We'll take it.
But so like you saw us start to make some of those investments with the knowledge agent, but we're just going to double down on that because we think that is such a critically important use case for helping us keep our customers' content fresh and up to date. That is something we'll continue to invest in. So that's like the second big thing, which is how do we make SharePoint as an authoritative source so much more powerful, both in the generation of content, keeping it up to date, and of course, being able to surface the relevant content at the right point in time and the LLM queries for it. And then the last thing I'll say is you'll see us continue to build AI into the fabric of SharePoint itself. So I think there's and less off as a bolt-on. When I say that, I mean, yes, you can have the traditional interface with AI, which is your chat pane on the right or on the left, depending on which app you use, and your conversational interface there. But I think you'll see us do more things like the FAQ web part that I said that is actually AI powered, right? Where AI shows up a lot more natively across SharePoint UX, as opposed to, okay, it's relegated to the chat or it's bolted on in this chat pane on top of the SharePoint platform. So I would say those are the 3 big things: simplicity, making SharePoint more LLM friendly in that sense, and building AI right into the fabric of SharePoint.
And so if people out there like have the internet outside of SharePoint, so it's time now like to bring all of this data into SharePoint so they can benefit from all of this coming to SharePoint.
Yeah, 100%. Like I know there are a whole bunch of migration tools out there, PNP, third parties. So yes, 100%. There hasn't been a better time to get onto SharePoint than now. I think in the history of SharePoint, anyway, so that is my perspective.
So two final questions for you then. Do you have a SharePoint myth that you'd like to bust? Any kind of common misconception? Oh, we've talked about a couple already.
Yeah, I would say I would say the biggest one was one which I covered a little bit earlier, which is SharePoint is like starch not 90s, like very 2000s, like intranet tool, which is a very classic 2000s UX, right? So I would say not quite. Like SharePoint is a lot more contemporary than people would think it is. Like when they see the kind of things that customers and partners like you are building on SharePoint, like it's in some ways a rude awakening. I was like, oh my God, what? I thought it was just consumer grade tools that could do this, not Microsoft SharePoint. I think that's one myth. I think the second one that I'll also say is, I think that SharePoint is just a source for content. I also think it is extremely powerful as a workflow management tool. And again, it's complicated to use in that use case, but the use case, as you say, is complicated. So to use it in that way, I think like SharePoint can be very, very powerful in terms of like how you use lists, how you hook it up with Power Automate, like automating workflows with email teams and so on and so forth. So there's a lot that you can do with SharePoint once you really start to dig underneath the covers beyond standing up an Intranet website. I would say like those are the two big ones that come to mind.
And so one final question for me. So and that's something we ask like to all our guests. So do you have currently like a favorite app that you are kind of using currently, using the most? It can be like within Microsoft, outside of Microsoft. You choose.
Well, I'll give you one of each. I'll give you one within Microsoft and I'll give you one outside of Microsoft. One within Microsoft, I've been using the Researcher Agent a lot. It is awesome. I love it. I think it is my go-to resource now when I want to get smart about a complicated topic pretty quickly. And it's like, I don't know, it saves me hours and hours every single time, like whether I want to get up to speed on something that's AI related, not AI related. Again, like I'm relatively new to SharePoint, right? So there's a whole host of history that I'm still learning on a day-to-day basis. Somebody will say something about SharePoint and I won't have any idea what it is. And then I'll go ask the researcher agent to like come up with a 2-page research summary report on what this thing is within SharePoint. I'll let it go do its thing, come back in 30 minutes and it'll have a crisp 2-page summary of what this is. And that would have taken me hours otherwise of kind of like sifting through documents and emails and reaching out to people or conversation, I don't know, like real face-to-face people conversations to understand what something is. So I think that is by far one of my favorite, I would say, Microsoft apps or experiences that I've really enjoyed using. The second one I'll say is Otter too. I really enjoyed playing around with it. I don't know if I managed to get an invite, so which is cool. So I think it's pretty game changing in terms of the kind of content that you can create and how easy it is to really to manipulate video content along with audio with Otter too. So anyway, those would be the two that I can think of right now.
I was not lucky enough to get an invite, but the outputs are extremely impressive.
Yeah, you run up against like you get throttled pretty quickly because it's just so expensive to generate video, and then like after a certain point, I think like it just like after a certain point, it just like kind of like dies on me, and then I have to wait for whatever counter it is that they have to kind of like reset, where they fill all the beans again, and then I can go and try it again. But when it works, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's a great time to be in the tech sector. I think there is so much happening so quickly.
So much changing every single day. It's not like the era of things changing over years or 6-month cycles or even quarters is gone. Like literally, things are changing.
A year is a month. 10 years is a year. A year is a month. I heard someone talking about that.
This feels like the golden rush phase, but like with AI now, with technology.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, and we're in some ways like we're still haven't uncovered truly what we're still like we haven't tapped into the full potential of I think what AI can do. We still learn, like we know that the tech is great, it works really well in certain sorts of use cases, but finding those use cases and translating that into customer value is like I think the next phase of journey that we'll be on. Anyway.
Kripal Kavi, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, awesome, Yarbus. Great to meet you, and hopefully I'll run into it at one of these MVP conferences in the coming days. And David, great as always.